Good afternoon. My name is Lucy Sandell, and I'm thrilled that you're joining us today for the second event of Career Month 2017. 16 webinars have been planned, and I hope that you can find others that interest you as well. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled The Future of Work, and I'll be sharing the link to the recording afterwards. Our presenter today is Elisha Abate. Elisha is a dual alumna from the college and the Booth School of Business. Prior to founding her practice, Elisha was Vice President of Human Resources and Director of Recruitment for Dow Jones & Company, the Wall Street Journal, and she served as Global Talent Acquisition at Anheuser-Busch. This webinar is a follow-up to Elisha's presentation in June 2017 called Ahead of the Curve, How to Empower Professional Success in the Uncertainty of Today's Economy. Elisha has decided to come off the road from her future of work journey after 243 days, and she speaks Spanish and Portuguese, which must have been very useful to her in her travels. It's my pleasure to hand over the controls to Elisha.
Lucy, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be back here, and welcome to everybody who is watching this live and who is watching this on the recording. So the future of work is something that I have become absolutely obsessed with. And for those of you who don't know the entirety of my story, before I quit the corporate world, I spent most of my career in some way, shape, or form recruiting talent all over the world. And I got tired of meeting people who are interesting and fabulous and creative and all things wonderful, but not particularly interested in or passionate about the work that they were doing. And this happened all over the world, and it happened from the most senior people in the company all the way down to the interns. And in the spirit of things that I don't want you to know about me, I was also not as passionate as I could have been about the work that I was doing. So I decided to quit the corporate world, initially to coach people into careers that are more fulfilling, then consult for companies on strategy and innovation, creativity, talent acquisition kinds of things, and teach and speak. And over the last couple of years, I began to notice some things happening in the marketplace that really sparked this interest around future of work, and we're going to dive into them here in a minute. But all of this culminating, these things that I was starting to find interesting in a project that I kicked off in January of this year, when I put everything that I own in storage, literally except for what fits inside of a carry-on bag, to figure out what it's going to mean to empower success in the uncertainty of this economy and the years to come. And so this is a bit of landscape to walk you through what I've found, what's going to be useful for you as you think about your career, and some tactical things that you can walk away with to start practicing now, because actually the future of work is now, so that you can continue to empower your success and strengthen your professional lives and lives otherwise outside of this. So by the time we're done here today, we will have explored factors that are changing the landscape, and creating opportunity for the future of work. We have acknowledged there's a big fat elephant in the room, and we're going to say hello to him today. We're going to learn what's going to empower success in the coming years, and we're going to learn a little bit of a framework of how to think about your career for the future of work, which is now. It's not in the Jetsons' future. It's very much right now. So what is happening? We are living now at the most exciting time in the history of ever for humanity. By all stretches of the word, we are, as a whole, far better off than we were before. We are at a point of 10% of humanity living in subsistence, where in 1980, it was only 1980 where there was an entire third of the planet's population. So economically speaking, as a whole, we're doing way better than we were before. The second piece is that there's much more money available for those of us who are interested in creating companies, who are looking for funding without giving away as much equity, who need some help paying for some bills in some cases. There's money available in ways that it has never been before. Last year was 2016, almost $739 million were raised through crowdfunding. And this is off the charts exciting. And also, there's democratization to access to, so thanks to projects like Google's Loon and other similar initiatives that Facebook and Virgin are doing, it's expected that in the next 5 to 7 years, 3 billion 3 billion people who have never had access to the internet and the entrepreneurial and educational opportunities that it provides are going to be coming online. So there's more access to capital. There are fewer people living in poverty or living in subsistence, which is all great news for us, thanks to the advent of technology and a few other economic factors there, which we're going to get into now, because while this is the most exciting time for humanity, well, actually it's still the most exciting time for humanity, but that it might not sound like it or feel like it at first. And this is where we get to the elephant in the room and the confluence of the events that got me out of the gate to do this whole future of work project, and then now to stop here in Chicago to build solutions around the future of work. So the elephant in the room. I have to confess that the first time that I gave a talk about the future of work and what it's going to mean for us here in Chicago back in April, the beginning of the conversation didn't go so hot, because as I was sharing all of these things that I was super excited about the future of work and the opportunity that's going to bring in disruption and computerization and all this stuff, I got on one half of the room of students looks of total terror, and the other half of the room being administration, kind of like arms folded, looking down. And so I started noodling on, what is it, why is it that it's so challenging to communicate around the future of work, and that it is opportunity as opposed to something that's just negatively disrupting what it is that we're up to. And I was prompted by a friend of mine who runs a big advertising agency out of California. And he said, you've got to play the game I say, you hear. Meaning, if I say disruption, computerization, change, which for me feels like excitement, most people hear a threat to my livelihood, an invalidation of the stuff that I've been studying or think is important, or the work that I've done to date. We hear uncertainty, and a lot of us aren't comfortable with uncertainty. And so I want to recognize that I hear and understand that distinction. And though, two things. One, it's not actually going to be incredibly different, right? We've just got to leverage some of the skills that we have today in order to face something that's going to at least initially feel different. And then the second piece is, that's partly why I pushed my own life to an absolute extreme of unknowing where I was going to live, how I was going to earn my money, total lack of structure, so that I could feel what this is to the extreme, so that I would know that as we're building solutions toward this, and the things that I'm suggesting to you I've already done the mad scientist stuff on myself. So what is this confluence of events that kick us off, or kicked off this whole project, that I noticed that's going to create disruption, which read that as opportunity for us? The first one is the computerization or mechanization of jobs. And there was a study out of Oxford that 47% of jobs in the United States are going to be computerized or taken over by robots in the upcoming years. And again, so the balance of that is that there's going to be $8 trillion in economic value created. That said, the jobs that are going to be coming may not look like the ones that are here. So that's happening, combined with the fact that, okay, so there's a shifting workforce population. There are the pieces that we've heard about. The baby boomers are retiring or staying longer, combined with the fact that millennials are beginning to work and they're incentivized in different ways. So those are things that we've heard about, but there's something that is really bumping up against how we view ourselves in terms of success and identity. That's a trend that's not going to be turning back, and so one that we're going to need to learn how to embrace and build success on top of, which is the rise of contract work. So in Europe, since 2010, more than half of the jobs that have been created are contract or freelance work, and that's not temp work, and that's not somebody coming to build shelves in your house alone. It's medical doctors, it's senior executives. And in the United States, if we bring that stat here, 23% of the jobs that exist today are gig or freelance work, and that number is expected to go up to 34% by 2020. So this is a trend that's here. Again, how is it that we're going to harness it to create magic for ourselves? And then, of course, in terms of shifting workforce population, those same 3 billion people, it's going to be super exciting that now the developing world has access to the internet and educational entrepreneurial opportunities. That same access, as we're looking at the developed and the developing world, is going to start to shift things around entrepreneurial opportunity and competition and other similar elements. So what is this going to mean for us? And then the third piece of the confluence of events, we've got the technology, we've got the shifting workforce population, and then depending on which economist you talk to, in the next couple of months or a couple of years, there's going to be an economic crash of some sort. And so these three things together are providing a perfect storm of what is it going to look like, right? So this perfect storm is what got me out onto the road in the first place, both pushing my own life to an extreme and then speaking with thought leaders around the world in the spaces that are impacting our professional lives in the future of work and what that's going to mean and what it will look like for all of us. And what I've come around to as we think about this, so I equate now as a moment in time that's similar to a tsunami. It's a moment in the tsunami when things have gotten eerily quiet and people are starting to poke their heads up and around and ask, what's going on here? There's something strange afoot, but that water is already coming, right? So again, the future of work is not, even though a lot of us aren't feeling it as much right now, a lot of people are saying, and I think as we look at political unrest and social unrest and things that are happening, that's a way of saying something odd is happening that I'm not comfortable with. So it's here, and just like surfing, if any of you have ever gone surfing, the name of the game with all of this is our interaction with the proverbial ocean, right? We're not going to control the ocean. We're not going to stop the tide. We can't do that. But what we can do is recognize it for what it is, learn what are great days to jump in the water, where the currents are taking surfers, what spots to avoid, and what spots are going to have great waves coming from them. So before I dive into solutions here, what questions can I answer for folks around the future of work and what that's going to mean for all of us?
Well, we've got one question, so folks, go ahead and start typing. What led you to travel so much in order to look at the future of work?
Yeah, so I started this, I think that the first seed that was planted for me about the future of work was reading a book by an economist called Tyler Cohen called Average is Over. And he talks about the advent of technology and how a normalized bell curve of income distribution and as well as opportunity, economic opportunity, was going to shift from normal bell curve to a right-skewed curve. And in his, it's a great book, so I highly recommend that folks read it. And in the back of the book, or as he's wrapping it up, he details the trends of what will happen for people. And one of the things that he suggests is that we're going to have to learn to be more mobile, either to follow opportunities or because of increase in cost of living. And actually, I don't know if any of you get the booth review, but serendipitously, the Fall 17 issue is how to create middle-class jobs. And one of the challenges, so it's not that there aren't jobs available, but part of the reason why people aren't going for those jobs is that they aren't geographically local. And so for me, all of that traveling, first was to experience what that might feel like. And for me, because I am a very risk-tolerant person anyway, I figured that if I didn't push my own self to just an absolute extreme of uncertainty, I wouldn't have the sense of fear, I think, that other people are sensing, and at least in my interactions with folks as we're thinking about this, have on their minds. So that was why the travel.
Great. Oh, we've got a bunch of questions. What is the time frame for this change? 1 to 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so that's another kind of depends on who you talk to. So we thought, as little as 8 years ago that self-driving trucks were an impossibility. And so I'll say all of this with the beauty of we actually don't know the answer to the question, and there's a lot of uncertainty, right? But as few as 8 years ago, we thought that self-driving trucks were an impossibility, and now they're here. And that's going to mean significant impact, of course, in transportation and logistics, and then all of those industries that are ancillary to that. A colleague of ours, an alum from Booth, who studies the retail sector, was interviewed by Business Insider this summer, and about all of the retail stores that are closing, the accelerated rate of retail stores closing. And the question was something to the effect of, were people not not cautious in making their predictions, or were they sort of overzealous in what it was that they were planning? And Ryan's answer was, that wasn't it. It's just that we drastically underestimated the impact of technology, meaning the interest in e-commerce that consumers would have. And so for some things it'll be faster. For other things, it will take a little bit longer, as you noticed in our political climate, forcing toward older technologies to not lose jobs will slow things down. But again, as soon as the economic or otherwise reasons for creating these things are strong enough, then the change will be coming. A great thing to do, and I'll get into this when we talk about what we need to do to empower our success. That study that I mentioned that's out of Oxford, actually, what they did is they did an algorithm of all of the jobs in the ONET database of the U.S. Department of Labor, and ran an algorithm of jobs of likelihood that they would be computerized or not, and based on, so are these tasks menial and repeatable and mechanizable, or do they require executive function and more creativity and things like that? So you can actually see through those predictions what is and isn't coming. We'll take one more for now, Lucy, and then we'll go on to the next piece.
Sure. Could you repeat the name of the book?
Oh, absolutely. It's called Average is Over by Tyler Cohen.
Great. And we'll just keep the other questions for later. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so all of this disruption, right? Stuff is coming and things are happening, and what can we do about it? And what is it that's going to empower our success? And I say all of this, and I offer all of this with the idea that this is all a work in progress. The first thing that I've come to understand, and I pulled from my own experience living in absolute uncertainty, from research that the World Economic Forum has done about what are going to be the skills that we need to know and understand. The first piece of this, there are three big things. The first piece is mindset. And the first component of mindset, one that I didn't talk about in the TED Talk, but that I have found massively useful, is a notion that the only thing that is constant in human beings' lives is that we have problems. They're normal. And there's a great problem understanding cycle, we'll call it, that comes from a book called Mastering Change by a guy called Ichak Adizes. And if you go to his website, you can actually download the first couple of chapters of this book for free just by putting your email address in. The only problem that we have is that we think we shouldn't have problems. But what happens in human life? A disruption happens, so it creates a problem that needs to be solved. And so what do? There's a two-prong approach. First, we decide that we're going to solve it, and then we execute on that solution. So we decide it, and then we do it. But in the resolving of the problem, what happens? Another disruption, which creates another problem, which creates the necessity to decide what to do and then to do it. And so that's the normal piece of humans' lives. And so the faster we can get with that program, then the easier things are going to be as we move forward. And how can we do that effectively? There's a really powerful distinction in the idea that am I the captain of my circumstances, or am I captive to the environment and the things that are controlling me? And there's a powerful question that we can ask ourselves as these things begin to change, because I get that it feels uncertain. I get that there's wonderment about what I'm going to do. What happens if this massive change comes? We could sit around and wish that it weren't happening, or we can say, given all of this, what do I want to create? Now, I had two of these experiences, two major ones, as I was traveling around this year. One I allude to in the TEDx talk, but the second one I was in San Francisco, and my major strategy for traveling, again, there was very much loosey-goosey, was to get off of a plane or get out of my car or whatever, find an Airbnb or a hotel tonight, or sometimes friends and family, and I just sort of figured that it would all work itself out. Well, I roll into San Francisco, and what I am looking on Airbnb, and there's either $30 a night, also rent you room by the hour kind of hotels, which is not an option, or $800, $900, $1,200 a night. There was nothing in the middle. Well, unbeknownst to me, there was a baseball game, there was a Google conference, and several other things happening, and the city was just saturated with people. On top of this, it was getting toward the end of the day, on top of this, I had left my telephone charger in the hotel where I was the night before, and so my battery was getting low, and I wasn't finding a place to stay, and I'm sitting there in this cafe, and I'm feeling just deflated and alone, and another one of those moments of what the hell did I do with my life? And again, you can sit there and say, why is this happening to me? I wish it weren't happening. Or you can say, okay, great, given all of this, how am I going to get resourceful? What do I want to create? And through some networks was able to get to an Airbnb that was actually right priced, and able to get myself, extract myself from what was would have or could have been an unsavory situation. But that's the difference. We can blame the economy, we can blame technology, we can blame all of this stuff, or we can say, okay, given all this, what do I want to create, and how can I create massive value for myself and others in the space? The second, or another critical piece of mindset, is the distinction between the world as it should be, or as we wish it were, as we wish it would stay, and the world as it is. And this is another one of those spaces where we could say, so in 2008, when the crash happened, we were in business school, and I was actually graduated from business school in 2008, and so many of my classmates who had what they thought were fixed jobs at investment banks, they had their offers rescinded with just a couple months or a couple of weeks before graduation. And what I noticed as people were recovering and finding new solutions for themselves is that the folks who fared better, who got over the hump faster, and who achieved that next new position faster, were the ones who stopped lamenting the job that they had lost and got into the mind frame of, okay, that's not there anymore. How can I create something amazing for myself? So what do you do? Like, how do you work your way around all of this? And the magic is to practice a growth mindset. It is a muscle that you can exercise. There's a great book by Carol Dweck called Mindset that really dives into this stuff. And I would encourage you to do things. So I partnered with Stanford a couple of years ago to do some research when I was at Dow Jones. And one of the teachers, one of the professors who co-taught the class, in addition to being an expert in his field of biology, is also a juggler. So what does he do? When he teaches other people how to juggle, the whole first class is spent throwing the balls on the ground. So that failing, whatever that means, becomes just not that big of a deal, right? It's just something, it's a part of the exercise of learning, as opposed to being perfect. And so I would encourage you to find ways to challenge a fixed mindset, to take an improv comedy class, read these books, challenge yourself, go out into the world and see if you can get 27 people to say no to you today, and how you can bounce back from that and be creative, but just practice flexing that muscle. The next piece, so the first piece is mindset, the second piece is education. What do we need to know in the realm of education? First, what opportunities are going to be available to us? So this was alluded to in the earlier question. What industries are going to be in ascension and what industries are going to be in decline? So I was in, as part of this journey, I was with Tony Robbins and a small group of people up in Whistler, and we were talking about self-driving trucks. And so since self-driving trucks are here, and it's a matter of time before they're on the roads and are taking over what traditional truck drivers would do, I would be thinking if I were contemplating the idea of going to 4 years of truck driving school and becoming a trucker, I would either do it with a very clear frame of mind that things were going to shift for me going forward, or I would perhaps rethink it. The same thing for industries that are ancillary to truck driving. So if I have a mom and pop shop along a major thoroughfare that maybe not as many people will be driving on, how could I pivot my business model in order to create this? That said, there are going to be all kinds of opportunities available and coming down the pike. Healthcare, home healthcare, elder care is booming and on a hockey stick kind of ascension. So if I'm thinking about retraining myself or a different way of helping people than perhaps a job that's being automated, that might be a great space to go. So understand and pay attention to what's in ascension and what's in decline. The second piece of education is entrepreneurship. So I mentioned those trends toward contract work. The future of work is, as I see it, is going to be divided into three kinds of money-making opportunities, let's call them. The first will be traditional salaried jobs. Those will still exist in some form and in some places. The second piece is entrepreneurship, straight up. I'm going to start a company and build a team and scale and grow. And then the third piece is entrepreneurship as solopreneurship or freelancer. So I need to figure out how to package my knowledge and sell it in a way that other people, organizations, partners are going to want to buy it. And so for those segments of folks who will be working for themselves, and even folks within the corporate structure, because you're going to need to understand, need to, at the very minimum, increase your tolerance for risk and change, getting a real clear idea of the basics of entrepreneurship. What does it take to market something? How do you test a viable product? How do you sell things? Or how do you get into partnership with people who are capable of doing that? So entrepreneurship and understanding it is going to be clutch. The third piece around education is continuous learning and understanding how you learn. So with things rapidly changing, the old model of education is that we would go to school, maybe a 4-year school, maybe some graduate work after that. But basically, once you're done learning, you're set until for the ever rest of your career. And that's just simply not the case now, because there's so much changing and moving. And things like coding and computer languages are not the only spaces where that's happening. It's all over the place. So getting into the game of continuous learning, be it through continuous learning programs at schools or coding boot camps like General Assembly, or even certificate programs that perhaps your employers provide. And another piece of the learning, continuous learning, and learning how you learn. So with lots of new information coming at us, it's going to be a real skill to develop information assimilation. How do we assimilate information best? Is it auditory? Is it visual? Is it kinesthetic? So how do we do this? And the faster we can learn how we learn, then the more empowered we're going to be as we move forward. So I'll stop here for a moment and take some questions around mindset and education, or any other ones, Lucy, that might address some of what's worrying around in people's heads.
Sure. Well, this came up earlier on. Do you see corporate America using contract or freelance labor more than before?
Yes. The trend will move closer and closer toward contract work I think for several reasons. One, which we see this a lot, and it happened, in fact, when I was still in the corporate world. Contingent workforces to supplement your core that you already have, either for projects or otherwise, are going to be critically important. And we see that a lot across the board in IT functions, especially, where it's hard to get talent in and to stay somewhere permanently, especially if they can get paid more being a freelancer sort of a person. I think that people are going to demand more freedom. I think there's a shift from millennials and how people are incentivized in the things that they value. So being able to have a kind of a core office space, but able to travel around and move around are going to be important sorts of things. And then for top talent, it's interesting. A friend of mine just recently sold his company to Indiegogo, and he was actually his only employee. Everybody else who he had, and it was a team, I think, of 12 or 13 people. Everyone else who he had, he could only have contract work because they are so smart and plugged into spaces around the world and other kinds of projects that they didn't want to be tied down to one spot. So this is something that we're going to see more and more of, yes.
Great. What is the outlook for worldwide employment or unemployment rate? That is, what is your hypothesis on automated technology adoption and the elimination of human jobs?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I mean, there are some interesting pieces, and I'm not sure 100% where I land with all of it yet. But so there's a piece of it that's going to be, so we mentioned this trend toward geographic location, which also affects this piece of contract work, by the way. This idea of geographic co-location with where opportunities are. So are people going to be willing to move to where the jobs are, or will jobs be willing to move to where the people are? If we can make that happen, I think that we can ease the shift between jobs lost and jobs gained, right? Because the pattern of technological revolution over, since the beginning of ever thus far, is that there's a technological disruption of some kind, which causes a temporary reduction in economic opportunity for those who lose their jobs. But through retraining and other things, overall, everybody ends up better off. The difference of what's happening right now is that the rate of disruption is happening faster than before. And again, geographically speaking, opportunities aren't necessarily staying in the same spot. So I'm from Detroit originally. Factories that closed there might be some new factories open now in the Carolinas, but folks who are geographically located in Detroit may or may not go down there. So a piece of this is, are people going to be willing to move? So then we can keep employment rates from dropping quite as much as they did before. The other piece that's, I think, is going to be huge in this is this difference is going to be a decision that people are going to need to make, and there are some arguments for this, particularly men, and we're talking about the United States here now. But so what happens that in roles that are traditionally male or female? So home health care, right, is an industry that's going through the roof, and a lot of the jobs that might be the equivalent of, let's say, a factory line worker kind of a job in terms of salary, is someone who has been deriving their masculine strength out of this very physical labor going to be willing to make the shift over to what's traditionally seen as a female role? We can do that kind of shifting, then I think, again, that's a difference in amount of opportunity available will diminish incredibly. And then there are, of course, questions around universal basic income. So if everything is really that computerized and we lose jobs at such a massive rate, will we need to create something around universal basic income? There are a lot of experiments that are happening with that right now. I have a theory that's not scientifically based, but that I just sort of am observing these things, and I think that Mark Zuckerberg was onto something when he's talking about purpose and life's purpose. Our unique competitive advantage is going to be doubling down on the things that we are both naturally talented at and passionate about, and so figuring out ways that create opportunities for us to educate ourselves, and then again figure out how to sell those abilities to other folks.
Great. I have two more questions that are lined up.
I maybe have two more answers.
I'm sure you will. As jobs are changing and people are reinventing their professional focus, Do you see the hiring recruitment process changing? Is HR getting more flexible in their backgrounds?
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in recruitment. So a piece of it is coming through greater transparency, period, across the job market. So what's one of the big, and thanks to technology of Google Jobs. So what's one of the biggest challenges that people have in looking for work is that there's a lack of transparency in the marketplace, in no small part because let's say that you're a programmer of some kind. Well, at Procter & Gamble, that programming job is called Analyst 3 Technology, and at Anheuser-Busch InBev, that's called Technical Analyst 4, and at Dow Jones, it's called UX Designer or something like that. You get the point. So right now, there's a challenge in helping people who may actually be qualified for jobs in connecting them with the jobs that are available simply because of that sort of discrepancy in the market and that non-understanding. So Google Jobs is helping bring transparency to that. There's another really cool company that I had the opportunity to hear their CEO talk and to meet with the guy who's running their business development. It's called Stella. And what they're doing, they're bringing they're bringing Fortune 500s and others onto a platform where they're basically doing candidate sharing for all positions that are open. And so what happens? Oftentimes candidates will be screened for a first round by people but not necessarily passed on to the next round at that particular company. So instead of having all of that pre-screening work go to waste, what they're doing is they're actually bringing all of those candidates together to a mass pool for all of the companies that are part of the platform. And so people will have, companies will have closer and better access to pre-screened talent. And then of course that same talent pool you can think of it kind of like a common application. Right? If I do the common application, then I apply to Chicago and Harvard and all of these other universities at the same time. So those kinds of things and shifts are happening. My sense also, and my hope, is that across the board, recruitment gets more business savvy. It's one of these spaces and I actually was having a conversation yesterday with the woman who runs HR here in Chicago at Blue Plate. It's amazing to me how HR and recruiting and that function in general is still so disconnected from the business, and I have no idea why. And though as the war for talent gets more intense, I think that people are going to be forced to really align themselves with the business a bit better.
Okay. What tools or books out there help you understand how to better package yourself as a contract entrepreneur?
Yeah, so there are all kinds of wonderful websites and articles and things like that. And one of the best sites that I've seen is Upwork. And so they've got all kinds of tips and tricks for how to create a profile that makes you interesting and relevant and competent. A tried and true resource, which was created initially for job search and job seeking, but I think works equally as well if one's thinking about becoming a solopreneur, are the exercises from What Color is Your Parachute? So this book has been around for a bajillion years, and they've got great exercises in it for helping you pull apart what it is that you're actually capable of doing. What is it that you've done in the past, and how does that translate into either more of what you're doing now, or how do you shift that into and take that, okay, if I want to plant my flag over here and do something else, how do I take what I've done in the past to begin talking about myself as who I'm becoming as opposed to who I was? That's another great resource for that. And then I'll get into some more of these as we move down the pike, because I've got some strategies around career thinking later on. Anything else, Lucy, before we?
Yeah, one quick one.
Awesome.
Can you be a freelancer in finance? My mindset is still that this is a traditional desk job.
Well, I would Probably yes. I would say I would wonder what kind of finance, and in fact, a lot of jobs, banking is going to be one of those spaces that that is also going to be interestingly impacted by technology, and you can see it even in in commercial banks, of course. Tellers are rarely needed now, and that's going to be more and more. And even in trading, right? We've seen this already. It's not such a huge surprise. Gone are as many jobs as there were on all of the trading floors. It's all gone algorithmic. It's at a click of a mouse. And then now, by the way, the computer's running it faster than you could have ever clicked your mouse in the background. So I would, if you're looking to do this as a, you want to work on projects, I would just start talking to people. There's always need for, when a new CEO comes in, they need some extra help, or they need a financial advisor, or if there's a turnaround component, there's temporary work to be done. A lot of our alums actually do that work. I don't know where the person who asked the question is based, but here in Chicago. So I would say, and my general strategy around career thinking anyway, is to take a few steps back and say, okay, if I want to make my money being freelance finance, how do I create it that way? And then begin creating.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So we did mindset, we did education, and now, so what are we going to do with education? You're going to pay attention to the industries that are in ascension and in decline. So now is not the time to hide your head under a rock, even though you might want to. Don't do it. Pay attention to what's going on so that you can continue to create for yourself. Learn something about entrepreneurship. As an additional answer to that question about how do you figure out how to package the stuff that you do, there is a brilliant book. It's called How to Start a Business, and it's a compilation from editors at Entrepreneur magazine, and that's in its 7th or however many edition. Even though it is, it was initially crafted for people who are with an eye toward growing a business or making a business scale, the questions, the frameworks, the strategies that they detail there are the same that you can use to help yourself be a successful freelancer. So yes, go check that book out. And then of course, keep learning, keep yourself plugged in and talking to other people, learning new and exciting things. Okay, so that's education. The third piece is collaboration, which is one of my favorite parts. Why is it we're going to need to do collaboration? Because of all of the stuff that's happening around us at an institutional level in order to assure mutual survival that's going to happen, and more importantly at an individual level, there's this piece of, again, of continuous learning and how you learn, and the network of people who you have. So I am a part of a mastermind group that meets every morning for an hour, and we are entrepreneurs across the board in everything from real estate to fitness chains to marketing and to selling pickles, oddly enough. And we meet together because we're going to have nothing of significant value can be created in the world on one's own. It's always in collaboration. There's always an idea, at the minimum, an idea sparked with other people, if not teams and structures and things that we have to build together. And particularly, again, as we're looking at how the world is going to be divided, the world of work, traditional salaried kinds of jobs, creating a freelance solopreneur kind of a business, or creating your own company, you're going to have a strong network of people to help you be successful. And speaking as a freelancer, so I refer to freelancing actually as building a mosaic career. So it's by piecing together things that you're good at, that you know how to do, that you can sell to other people, that you build this mosaic of your life and your career. And having a strong network of people to either partner with. So I know lots of other very talented people who do creativity work and recruitment strategy and innovation work and other related and ancillary activities, so that when I'm approaching a big company and giving a proposal, then I know that I've got this bank of people who I can call on to support me, so that I can actually offer the the proposal to get the work. Then there's also this notion of hearing about opportunities, right? Other people are plugged into different networks. And so my friend Maggie, who's there in the middle, she's a marketing master. She's speaking with a company who needs some recruitment innovation strategy work, and so she's able to connect me with those people. So you want to have your networks alive and plugged in and really revving. So activate your network. A couple years ago, I wrote an article or a blog for the Chicago Alumni Magazine called Networking for Introverts. So for all of you who are on the call and saying, oh my God, I could never do that and never get in touch with other people, first of all, I am actually an introvert. It doesn't seem like it when you meet me, but this is a learned skill, and in fact, recruitment is a great way to be an introvert. Why? Because I spend all my time asking other people really good questions and then not having to talk myself. So you're going to want to activate your network, even if you're an introvert. It's something that you can do. And how do you do it? You do it by leveraging a strength that you already have, which is getting curious. You just get curious about what's going on in other people's worlds. What kinds of problems are they having? What kinds of challenges are they facing? Are those challenges something that you could help them solve or resolve? Or do you know someone who could help connect them? So the name of the game, again, is community building and collaboration. What questions could I answer about any additional stuff of the first two pieces, mindset, education, collaboration, and this third piece, collaboration here, before we move on to a framework and thinking around career design?
Well, we're caught up. I guess people are just too engaged to type questions for now.
I'm gonna run with that. I love it. So mindset, education, collaboration, how do we think about career design in the face of this? And by the way, this is another one of those places where the future of work is not out there. This distinction in thinking around and about career is not something for the future. It's actually something that's going to serve you really well now. Why do I say that? Because the traditional model of career design, which I refer to as logicking or building block, is broken. And why do I say that it's broken? Because if you look at the stats of people who are engaged at work in the U.S., in the U.S., 68% of people are disengaged or highly disengaged at work, which I read as bored to miserable or worse. And so why are we doing this to ourselves? It's bonkers. So the Astros won last night, so 0 places other than Major League Baseball is batting 300 a reasonably good statistic. So what happens with traditional career design? We go to school, we learn some stuff, and maybe we have an internship or whatever, and we scan the market, we say, okay, what could I logically do with this? And then you lock in onto something. And then you amass a few years of skills and experience, and you say, okay, with this new stuff, what could I logically do? And you scan the market and you lock in on the next thing, and you just kind of keep building that way. The challenge with this in the world as it sits today is that if you are like me, and most people I know, made any decisions for yourself earlier in your career that aren't particularly aligned with who you are and what you value, then all you're doing is making bad decisions on top of bad decisions on top of bad decisions. This is going to be particularly this is going to be exacerbated as we look toward a shifting and increasingly disrupting kind of a world, because that linear path isn't going to be there anymore. It might look linear, but then, with an advent of technology, it might get chopped off completely or shifted in such a dramatically different way that you'll have to make a decision. Okay, do I want to do the education to move myself over to the shift in this space, or do I want to do something else? So what I offer is a strategy called planting your flag, which is taking a few steps back and saying, how do I want to be in the world? What do I want to value? What things do I find important? And then aligning your skills, resources, and talents, stuff that you've already done, behind creating that. Figuring out, by being in conversation with other human beings, what else do I need to aggregate to my current skill set in order to get myself where I want to go, and then to get out into the world and make it happen. So we talked about the fact that this is the most exciting time in humanity. We have more access to food, we have more access to money, we have more access to technology and education, the things that are going to support us as we continue to grow as a species on this planet. And we talked about, within that same context, these 3 things that are going to disrupt our work world as we know it, how we define success, how we earn our money, these critical questions, which are the advent of technology, the shifting workforce population, and a pending economic crisis of some kind. And then through the experience and research, the three main solutions for this are around mindset. How do we build a mindset that's more resilient? The second piece around education, just being plugged into what's happening, getting some entrepreneurial skills, and then learning how we learn so we can assimilate information more quickly. The third piece, of course, is collaboration. We won't be able to do anything on our own. So how do we plug ourselves effectively into the networks that we're already connected to and build new ones in order to ensure our success? And then finally, of course, the distinction between thinking about one's career as a series of Legos or building blocks that we logically lay down one in front of the other, or taking a few steps back and saying, how do I want to be in the world? What do I want to create? So with all of that, what other questions can I answer?
Well, we're pretty quiet now. Explain plant your flag and how you go from that to the next step.
Sure. So planting your flag in thinking about creating a career that's powerful. There's a framework that I've developed that's divided up into three parts, which is committing to either creating a new career or career transition or transformation of some kind. It's actually creating it, and then it's communicating about it. And I'll walk you through what that means. So the first piece is actually committing that you're going to make a change for yourself. And sometimes that committing comes in that sort of like nagging thought on the inside, like, is this all there is for me? Could there be something more? That was what happened in my case when I left Dow Jones. Or it could come in the form of a massive disruption. You get somebody gets fired or downsized, or technology takes over your job, and so you're forced into a commitment to make a change of some kind. So there's committing to it. Once you've committed to making a change, there's actually creating it. And the first piece of creating it is self-knowledge and self-understanding. Part of it are kind of like aptitude tests and things that we've done in the past. But again, if we just keep using only those same strategies, we're going to keep finding ourselves in spots that aren't as aligned with who we are and how we want to be in the world. And so like when I work with my clients, I will either, if I'm in a classroom, I will have people in partners create prototypes for themselves and their most amazing futures. If we were to do it one-on-one, you would do a modified version of that exercise and design out what you want, fairy godmother, what you want your life to be, what you want it to look like. And this is how you're making your money, the kinds of teams you're working on, what kind of impact you want to have, the intellectual challenges that you're looking for, money, where you're living, geographic location, family, all of this stuff. You look at all of that, and with this prototype, in addition to just pulling the ideas out of your head and having them on paper, which is a powerful enough exercise in and of itself, through what you design, you begin to notice themes of things that you value: adventure, stability, independence, creativity. All of these components. You pull out this list of what I call filters, anchors or filters. And you take these filters, and so therefore let's imagine that you're interested in 3 different industries: ed tech, industries or functions. We'll call it ed tech, we'll call it advertising, and we'll call it political research. Who knows? So then you say, okay, of these 15 things that I value here, inside of the space of ed tech, every company that I research, every conversation that I have, every interview that I have, I'm going to be measuring it against these things that I value. On a scale of 0 to 10, is this hitting independence? Is it hitting adventure? Is it hitting financial stability? And even though the 0 to 10 scale, it's somewhat subjective because it's you who's assigning the values, it pulls it out of your head and you get to see much more clearly, okay, I'm closer to something that feels more aligned with who I am and the impact that I want to have in the world. And then you continue that process until you create the opportunity for yourself. And then once it's created, then you're going to learn to do some stuff, and then you'll do the exercise again, take a few steps back. Hey, how closely is what I'm doing aligned with what I really value, or is there something else that I could add to this?
Okay, thank you. I know we still have questions, but at this moment, I have to give up the room that I'm using, so we always have to cut off at 12:55. But I want to thank all of you for participating. Thank you, Alicia, for coming back to us. We really appreciate it. People stuck with us the whole time, which is amazing.
Awesome. And high five for everybody who's on the call.
I'm high-fiving you back. I love it when our most popular speakers come back and do a follow-up on their work and research. So I just want to let everybody know that Career Month continues tomorrow and tackles the question, what's your leadership style? And we're going to be hearing from alumna Christina Holloway. So thanks again, Alicia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good rest of the day. And your questions that have not been answered, go ahead and email them to me, and I'll pass them along to Alicia. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.